So welcome everyone. I'm so glad that we could all be together here today and talk about productivity with specific relationship to resilience. And my name is Laura Hyder, and I am the Senior Consultant for Leadership Development in the Leadership Development Office here at UAB. And I am joined today by my co-host, Dr. Matthew Painter.
Hi, everyone. Thank you all for coming. We're very excited to be here. As Laura mentioned, I'm the Director of Leadership Development, and we're excited to be hosting our Leadership in Practice radio show and podcast, where we get to tap into your expertise around how to be more leader-like in our organization. And today's topic is around resilience and so forth. So we're very excited about that. Let's go ahead and have some introductions for our very esteemed guest. Evelyn Jones, would you mind giving us a little rundown of your background?
Oh, sure, no problem. I'm Evelyn Jones. I currently serve as the Executive Director for Diversity and Community Affairs for the School of Medicine here at UAB. Prior to coming to UAB, I was an administrator at the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota, supporting the Department of Internal Medicine as administrator and as associate administrator for faculty and staff development. I've been at UAB since 2008 for the last almost 6 years in the Office for Diversity and Inclusion.
Excellent, thank you. And then Dr. Larson, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you, Matt. My name is Jean Ann Larson, and I'm the Chief Leadership Development Officer for UAB Health System and the School of Medicine. And I've been at UAB only for about 4.5 years, but it's been an incredible 4.5 years. And prior to that time, I've been in a variety of organizations, different roles, really had the opportunity, if you will, to kind of learn and grow and reinvent myself a couple of times. And I think that's what kind of helps me with this whole resilience topic. And I've been a student of productivity. Really, it dawned on me the other day, I've really been a student of productivity most of my life. My undergraduate degree was actually in industrial engineering, where you really focus on how do you help organizations be more productive. And it's not soon, but a few years later, it occurred to me that it's all about how productive we are as individuals and how well we take care of ourselves and how we bring ourselves to work. And then as well as how we lead and how others have led us. It all leads back to helping us be productive. So thank you for the invitation to be part of this podcast. And I'm excited to be doing this with Evelyn.
So just leading off on this topic, I'm interested in getting your insight on what resilience means to you. How do you define that, and what does that mean to you?
I guess I'll start. For me, resilience simply means the ability to adapt and adjust as things change. And a lot of times those changes may not be the most positive changes. A lot of times when we talk about resilience, we're talking about how are we adjusting, how are we adapting, how are we getting through some of the more difficult or challenging times that we have in our lives, and what are the strengths, what are the things that we draw on to get us through those times, get us out even better. From my perspective, it's helping us to grow, helping us develop, helping us become even stronger and better for the next time, because there's always going to be a next time.
I love that, Evelyn, and I love the fact that you said, I think the classic academic definition is, you bounce back to quote unquote some normal, but that's not how it works. If you're fortunate and you figure this out, you do actually learn and you become a different and hopefully a better person and more prepared to deal with what goes on. The other thing that I'm seeing with respect to resilience, particularly as we look at sort of this coronavirus thing, is it's not even just adapting to the big things, which of course we do that, and that teaches us to be resilient. It's just, some days are just irritating. It's like, how do you bounce back from that kind of in the moment and stay productive? It's like death by 1,000 cuts. So I'm really learning that, resilience is certainly about the big changes in our life, but sometimes it's just about those days that are going to happen. And how do you, maintain your positivity, your professionalism, and your ability to lead?
Great.
So as successful leaders in our organization, I'm curious to hear you guys talk about how did you all develop resilience? I mean, you obviously had to do that to get to where you are. So walk us through that.
I think it's all of our life experiences. I think it's everything that we go through. We have experiences. We learn the things that help get us back up. And so I think as we have more and more and more of those experiences, and it's like Jean-Ann said, they're not necessarily large experiences or big life-changing experiences, but those little things that happen day to day and how we move through them. So I've seen this really as a lifelong process of something happening, adjusting, getting up, moving on. And waiting, not necessarily, with bated breath, but waiting for that next thing, or knowing that that next thing is going to come along, and knowing that you are going to be able to get through it. I think what those experiences teach us is that we have the capability of moving forward, that we have the capability of picking ourselves up and putting one foot in front of the other and moving forward. And I think the more times we do that, the more we realize that we are capable, that we have that ability, and that there's not that thing that's going to keep us knocked down, that we are. It's kind of like, I have a trainer who comes, and Laura knows this. She's been aware of and it's one of those things that I learned. If I'm going to have an exercise program that is going to be regular, I have to have somebody behind me, pushing me for that. And not only behind me, but she comes to my house, and I know that if she didn't knock on that door, I may not have that session that day. So I learned what worked for me. And so I think that is the way resilience is. We learn those things that work for us, that keep us moving.
Absolutely. No, I love your examples there. I think what's helped me is when you get through them, you think, okay, I've survived that. I got this. I can do it. You gain a little bit of self-confidence or in your ability to get through it. But sometimes it's being in the moment. So I remember a couple of things that did happen to me that put me way outside of my comfort zone. One of them was being, dropped into a foreign country where I didn't speak the language. I was with a family, so there were no other Americans, which actually turned out to be good. But you're trying to figure out what's going on. You don't even know what questions to ask, and nobody understands you if you did ask them. And I remember thinking, okay, but I'm okay. I have no clue what's going on, but I'm okay. So I found myself in those situations. I mean, unless you're in a plane that's crashing or your house is on fire, when you're going through that time, most of the time, I'm okay. And that sometimes is a mantra for me. And when I've been in those situations and I've gotten through them and said, no, it turned out. And then to Evelyn's point, not only did I quote unquote get through them and I was resilient, my goodness, did I learn a lot, in that moment. And it may not have always been comfortable, and sometimes it's lonely, but I learned a lot. So, and I learned I'm okay.
And it was harder for me because I'm a worrier. I am a worrier.
Yes.
And I had to learn that, I have the capability, I can get through things, and I don't have to worry. It does me no good to worry about all the things that could happen. And that used to be, and that's something that I really had to work on, because that was something that was always kind of in the back of my mind, this is going well, but what could happen? What could go wrong? And I know that I don't have to worry about that, because whatever happens, I can handle it. And that's really how I feel. Whatever, I don't have to worry about all the things that might, because whatever does, I can handle it.
Deal with it. No, I love it. We call that the worry gene in my family, and I've got it. But I think there's a Swedish proverb that says, worry casts a much bigger shadow than the problem itself. And I have to tell myself that as well, because I think some of us are wired to do that. But and even if you do worry, you can never anticipate anything anyway, so it's a waste of time. But I think that helps you build your resilience, because we can get caught up in our heads and all that kind of stuff, and that's not good for us or for anybody around us.
So Evelyn, I'm curious, do you have a story that you'd be willing to share about a time you had to push through something that you thought, this is real unusual, I'm not sure how I'm going to handle this?
I probably have a few short little examples that touch on different aspects of life. A key one was the birth of my daughter, where there were real issues. And we had no preparation for it because the pregnancy was perfect. If I could define a pregnancy as perfect, it was perfect. The birth was not. And it was rather shocking, a surprise. I'm gonna do that. A surprise, but we were in a wonderful healthcare organization. We just kind of dealt with things as they came. Put our trust, put our faith outside of ourselves, because that is what we had to do, and really came through that. And it was a day-to-day, hour by hour operation, in that you just didn't know what was going to happen, but you had to be ready for whatever happened. And that's one that was a key moment for our entire family. Another fun, it was fun at the end. In St. Lucia, Tony and I climbed the pitons. Wow. And it's 2 hours straight up and straight down. And when they describe it online, they talk about a hike, not a hike, a climb. And now I actually went online recently just to see how it's being described now. And more people are being honest about it, because it is truly a climb, and it's a climb straight up. When we were there, it was during the rainy season. It started raining. Less than halfway. We weren't quite halfway up. And so you've got rocks, you've got roots, and you're grabbing onto anything to just pull yourself up to the next step. I laugh about it because we got up there, you're dirty, you're muddy, and then you have to come down, and coming down is really hard on your knees, but you feel so good when you've done it. It's like, that to me was resilience, knowing that, because you didn't know what the next step, what you were going to need to do to make it up that mountain for the next step. You had no idea what you were going to need to do, what direction and you had a guide with you. You can't do it without a guide. So we had a group of there were about 10 of us going up together with our guide. So to me, that was resilience. That was more, it tested me physically, it tested me mentally. I was so excited. We did it. My husband thinks maybe we should go do it again. I don't need to do it again. I've done it once. I'm done. It's great. I love that. I love how I did it. But that was just one of those fun things that I think, because we had heard stories of individuals who somebody would have to come up and get them and take them down because they couldn't make, so I didn't want to be one of those people. So it was, that was one of my fun examples of resilience, productivity, and stick to it to this.
Well, plus you and Tony have a great story to chuckle about.
Exactly.
When you had me hike up that.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's great.
That's a great metaphor, Evelyn, just for the little mountains of our lives, that represent, all the stuff that pops up in our day, actually. Mm-hmm. To piggyback off that, one of my kind of guiding mantras is really, some progress is better than no progress.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. And I've got through grad school with that mantra, literally. Like every day I might read, Jeananne teases about this idea of like 10 minutes a day. That was my 10 minutes a day. Like that was some progress of 10 minutes is better than no progress. Right. So
keep rock moving.
Yes. Right.
So it seems to me like both of you have mentioned the idea that building resilience and kind of seeing it through is kind of rewarding. Can you talk a little bit more about that? How is building resilience, how does that feel rewarding?
I think it helps build self-confidence, because like I said, you get through something. I mean, even with Evelyn's example of, let's quit calling it a hike, climbing that mountain.
Right.
And I think of my experience, being this 15-year-old kid from a small town in Kansas, first time I flew on a plane and I'm dropped into a family in Mexico. I got through it, and I not only survived, I thrived. I fell in love with the people. I fell in love with the culture. I still refer to them as my Mexican family. So it was really something that I think, marked, if you will, my, it really changed me. So I think that's something to be proud of. Yeah, so I think it really helps you with that. It gives you that sense of self-confidence. And even when I'm, talking to our daughters and they're going through something, it's just, hey, wait a minute, remember that time you did such and such, just to remind them, you're really tough. You're so much tougher than you think you are, and you've got this and whatnot. And I don't just say that idly, because I can give them examples from my own life. So
is part of resilience then kind of reframing things, reframing a situation, or how does that work?
I can't say that because I don't think I knew enough about it to frame it or reframe it. I mean, I had no clue, and that one example I keep going back to, I went from a tiny little town in the middle of nowhere to a burgeoning city, completely different culture, different language. I had no expectations. I don't know what I thought I was going to do. I had studied French in high school, so of course I ended up in Mexico. So I had no clue. So it's not a matter of reframing it. For me, it was more gradual. And I think that's part of, I always say, the most important part of learning is really reflecting. And I think as you go through these challenging times, and I mean, even Evelyn's example with her daughter, you really reflect back and you think about, what happened, what did I learn? And hopefully one of the takeaways is, hey, this was really rough, but I got through it, and it's informed what I'm going to do tomorrow and how I'm going to live the rest of my life.
And that's something I've been thinking about as we've been going through the current situation, as we've all been going through our COVID circumstances. And I've mirrored that and kind of married that really with the racial injustice that's been top of mind recently. And then the fact that, we're all having to be at home, or a lot of us are having to be at home as we work. And how do we take what some people may view as an inconvenience or a negative circumstance and turn it around and start looking at what is positive about being able to be home, and what are some of the things that you can do to enhance or support your productivity while you're home in this circumstance. And so I've been thinking about just a few ways that we can try to make sure that we look at this as, I see it as short term. One of my ideas is, this too shall pass, and we will get back to actually a better circumstance than we left. But how do we make sure that we aren't taking this particular time for granted and learning all we can from this so that we take it forward? I've tried to look at various ways of working. What are some of the ways that I work differently, but that may be better because of this circumstance? How do I ensure that I maintain the degree of productivity that I want for myself and that I know is expected of me by others? So those have just been some of the things that I've been thinking about as we've been sitting home, trying to work, trying to not necessarily separate work and home, but really integrate those two things. How do we integrate them, but not allow work to completely take over? So those are just some of the things I've been thinking about as I've been thinking about resilience and our current circumstance.
Yeah, and here, I mean, any way we can learn to integrate and do better when we go back. Mm-hmm. We have a chance to completely, I think, reinvent it, and I think that's critical. And I know there's several things in my life, and it's one of those things, stuff that I've started to do because I have to do them because, we can't travel and we're at home.
Right.
And about several times a week, I have one of those slap the forehead. Why didn't we do that before? I think I'm probably more, I have, family living all over the country, and my husband has family in another country, and we're connecting with them. Why weren't we doing that before? I mean, so hopefully we will continue to maintain those connections, because it's very easy to set up Zoom calls, have happy hour, and quite honestly, they're fun. And it's, something we should continue doing. So I think, how can we learn from this? How can we bring back the normal? Matthew and I have talked about this whole issue about working remote and being able to have that choice and not being so worried about what I call FaceTime. And I'm not talking about the technology, but that you have to be in the office or you're not productive. Why don't you let people be where they need to be productive? Sometimes that's the office, but sometimes it's not. And that's going to be a hurdle for some people. I mean, and it isn't, certain people, particularly of my generation, it's like, you're showing your face, you're in the office at 7 o'clock and you don't leave until 6:30, and you may be playing video games for all we know. You're in that chair. So hopefully we can, get our arms and our minds around different ways of working.
And I think we will. I've heard from a few supervisors who have actually been talking about, making sure that they allow that flexibility, as long as the productivity is there. We should try to allow as much flexibility as possible in how we get our work done. I feel lucky in that my children are adults and not living with me. Yes. I think about those colleagues of mine who have young children at home who are trying to do both. Who are trying to work, who are trying to maintain their families during work. I feel grateful that this happened in a time period where I'm able to focus on work and my children are able to focus on their work in their homes. So yes, in yes. their homes. So I think we're learning a lot that we can take after the pandemic is behind us. And I think it's going to be, I'm hopeful that it is going to be for the better for the majority of us, the things that we're learning now and how we can continue to apply them once we have more options.
So if you are advising people to how to cultivate resilience, how to be able to cultivate the sort of resilience that facilitates productivity, like you've been doing during this time, how would you advise people to go about doing that?
You know, what I would say is there has to be a plan for the day. Now, I'm one of those individuals who I have to start my work day. I have to get up. Even at home, I have to take my shower. I have to get dressed. I have to be in the frame of mind that I am going to sit down and work. I have never been one of those individuals who could work in pajamas. I just can't do it. It just seems, and there are people who say they do it and they love to, it just would not work for me. So I think finding that thing that works for you, starting the day, and I think it's and just as important as starting the day, there has to be those transitions to start the day. There have to be those small break transitions throughout the workday, and there has to be that transition at the end of the day. Because I think what we run into, and I think which would lead us to, I think individuals having a real concern about working from home, is that your email is always up, your computer is always on. There has to be a point in time where you identify that your workday is done, and that you're shutting down, and that you're going to do something different, and that it is substantially different from what you were doing during the day, even though it's something that you're still doing in your home. Maybe you go outside, maybe you go for a walk, maybe you call someone, interact, make dinner. But it's those things that you do that identify those points in time. And because we talked about burnout, and I think it would be so easy to maintain your workday 24/7 in this environment. So I think you have to be so intentional with how you start your work, how you complete your work, and how you end your work. So for me, those have been really key. I have to say, I have to be of the right frame of mind. I have to feel like I am appearing as an employee, as a person who is getting prepared to do work. And it just helps me make that transition to and from work. I can at the end of when I've checked my emails for the last time and decided that that's it, I can shut things down, and then we wait for it because it'll be there the next day. That's how I look at it. It's going to be there, and I will address it then. But that's how I think that's, like I said, I think you can easily fall into the trap of working continuously, and we have our emails on our phones. We are totally connected all the time, so you have to be extremely intentional when you disconnect from work.
Yeah, I love it too, and I think it's part of the balance we have, because I love the idea of the work-life integration, which you have a chance to do at home. That's the upside, but the downside is disconnecting. And I just noted some things that really helped me is I kind of have like daily habits at certain times of the day that I'm going to do this, and it sets that boundary. And I think Evelyn worded it. You're going to shut down at such and such a time, and kind of I have to tell myself kind of at the beginning of the day, otherwise I'll turn around and go, oh, I was going to shut down an hour ago. And then what is that routine? You know, maybe you fix dinner, maybe you go out, you know, whatever it is that you do. But the other thing about the disconnecting I do, and I think it's okay to say this even though you're recording it, I have been really hard trying to, I put the phone aside, and I have some other things so that if my children needed to get me in terms of an emergency, I shut it down at 8 o'clock. I completely shut it down, and I don't look at that email until the morning, because to Evelyn's, it will make you cry. And besides email, news, you know, I figured, Jean-Ann, who are you that you don't look at your phone for maybe, you know, 8-10 hours? The world will continue to spin, and it'll be just fine. So, and I've specifically done that, and I've gotten better at it now, just because I realized it was making me crazy. So I think that's the thing. And one of your earlier questions, Laura, was to ask, what would you do to advise somebody to build resilience? I would ask them to reflect upon some of the most difficult times in their lives. And we've all had them, we're human beings, it's part of being a human. And really think through how they handled it, what did you do? Because a lot of times, myself included, and I think to some of the times when I was younger, you just keep marching and you get through it, but you never really step back and say, hey, wait a minute, what just happened? What did I learn from it? I think reflection is so important. And Matthew has seen me, even when I've worked occasionally with some of the residents around leadership, I give them a survey, you know, let's think about a time that you were a leader, you know, maybe you were president of your class, you did whatever. And I try to get them in the frame of mind where you have some strengths as leaders. And I'd say you have some strengths around resilience. Just think about what they were, think about areas that you want to improve on, because we have to reflect upon it before we really get, I think, the value out of it, because we've all had those moments. We just need to appreciate them, and the fact that it wasn't an accident that we came out on the other side a different person.
Exactly. And the other thing I want to make sure that I bring up is that as far as resilience, personal relationships, social relationships are so important. Making sure that we continue to stay connected with the key people in our lives, because they are so important in helping to build us and continue to shape us and to give us that feedback and that great motivation that we need. Where a lot of times, you know, we're mulling things over, and we're mulling and mulling and mulling, and then we get a different perspective, and it makes all the difference when we have those connections and we have those trusting relationships with individuals that we can share the things that are concerning us, and they can then reflect back, but in a different way. And like Jean-Ann said, and then they can highlight for us those times that we have gone through similar or something like that, and that we made it through. And just because sometimes when you're in the middle of it, it's all consuming, and you're not thinking about what you did in the past that prepared you to handle what you're doing now.
Very well put. It's like the old song, you get by with a little help from your friends.
Exactly.
And find those trusted advisors who are very different in perspective from you. I'm lucky, I married one, you know, we couldn't be as opposites, but that's really helpful. And he's, you know, not afraid to challenge, which I think is valuable. But even staying in, I mean, you know, I've lived in different places. I've got connections of friends. I try to even stay connected with some of them, because what you find with some of those people, if I ever see them again in my life, but every time we connect, It's just this whole perspective, and they know a different part of me. They know me when I was in that role. So I am very conscientious about trying to, thank goodness for social media, reach out and touch people on their birthdays. I've got thousands of people, thank God I'm reminded. But it's that once a year when I think, oh yes, this was Julie. We got through this incredibly difficult time together, or we were working with that horrible, horrible boss. God help us. But you remember those times, and you can laugh about them, and you can help build each other's resilience. And then when one of you is in a jam or whatever, I've got a couple of friends that even before COVID, we called them Televino sessions. You know, we'd get together on the phone and drink wine. But to Evelyn's point, stay connected to people. I mean, if I had any wisdom about leadership, it's all about relationships. In fact, life, it's all about relationships. When they asked, Warren Beatty or Warren Bennett, who's one of my gurus in leadership, he's written a boatload of books. He's, really smart. Somebody said, what leadership book would you recommend? He goes, none of them, not even mine. Because read literature, learn about people and human relations. And I thought, that's brilliant. Oh, great. I'm going to go read a bunch of books. I can do this. But, specifically learn how people interact and how they help each other grow. So that was
I know
cool.
that when we talk about this topic and when we're facilitating it, sometimes we talk about values, we talk about, gratitude and so forth. And I think a lot of that, what you're talking about, is really centered around some of our values and gratitude. How do some of that's subconscious, some of it's intentional. Walk us through, what does that look like for you all? I think you mentioned some of these already.
For me, gratitude is at the core. Mm-hmm. I've been thinking quite a bit about it as we've, like I said, I've been thinking a lot about various topics as we find ourselves in the midst of everything that's happening now. And while you could really focus on some of the not so positive things going on right now, there are so many things that I feel like I have to be grateful for. I am grateful that in the midst of this, all of my family is healthy and safe. I'm so grateful for that. I am grateful that we still have meaningful work that we're able to do. I am grateful that I have a faith that lets me believe and helps me believe that we are going to get through this, and that we are going to come out better. I think there are so many things that if we step back and look at them and listen and look at our lives and look at the people around us, that we can identify so many things that we have to be grateful for, that they really kind of overshadow or at least mitigate some of the other concerns. One thing I just thought about, I'm so grateful. I watched Representative Lewis's funeral service over the weekend. I am grateful for him as an individual. I am grateful that he did the things that were right, that he felt were right, and that he maintained that over a lifetime. That's something that I am absolutely grateful for. I'm grateful for individuals who put themselves out there to try to make our world better. So gratitude for me is and I remember I had a friend, and she has since passed away, but she was not very happy, just in general. So I actually bought a beautiful journal, a silk covered journal, because I thought, this will get her to write. So I said, just what I would love for you to do, I said, just write down at the end of the day. I said, and it doesn't have to be every day, but just think of 3 little things that you're grateful for that happened today. And she looked at me as if I had lost my mind. And she never did it. And I pushed a couple of times, and she was never able to really see the value. And I still, and to this day, I really believe that that could have had a big impact on her if she had just given it a chance, just to think about those little things. Gratitude is everyday gratitude is not going to be those big things that pop right out. It's those little things. It's the person who says, you know, oh, I really like your hair today. You know, those little things that help boost you and keep you moving forward. So yes, gratitude is tremendous for me. And I have to make myself sometimes step back from the moment and say, okay, Evelyn, this may not, right now you're feeling not real nice, but what are some of the, what are some of the things that you have to be grateful for that will really negate these negative feelings? So I use that, and I use it very intentionally because it has had such an impact on me.
Mm-hmm. And it's a good therapy, I have found, for worrying. It's really hard to worry if you're being grateful for something. And the funny thing about, for me, gratitude, I don't sound very imaginative, but when I just write a couple of things, I journal every day, and I'll write down a couple of things I'm grateful. And here's the embarrassing part. Sometimes it's the same stuff over and over, but it is, you know, it's something I enjoy, and I'll just notice it every day, you know, and it can be little things that I see on my walk. It might be the kindness of a stranger, you know, just little things like that. In fact, I think one of your questions, if there was one thing, and of course, Jean Ann can never keep anything to one thing, but if there's one thing that you could adopt a bit, one of them would definitely build gratitude, really see gratitude. Also, and this is particularly maybe more for younger generations, you know, definitely be you, but what that means is don't compare yourself to other people. Shut down the social media. It's all invented. I don't like most social media for that, because people get really wound up in it, and you don't want to be like those people anyway. You want to be you, and it's just, you know, I think that helps build resilience. You know, how you got there, the way you show up today, it's really amazing when you think of all the stuff you've been through and what you've learned, and you know, how long we've been on this planet. So, you know, so that's what I try to do.
Gina, and I think you're so right. That whole comparing yourselves, and my daughter, I would say, you know, don't you know that how many takes it took, or how many pictures it took for this individual to post this one?
Yeah.
And that's not real life. And both of my kids, yes, I think they both have definitely gotten it, that this is that what they're seeing out there is not real life, that these individuals, and you don't want to live your life that way. And you definitely don't want to live your life constantly comparing yourself to this ideal that the individual who posted it doesn't even live up to. So if I could say one thing to young folks now, it is, that's not real. Like you said, Jean Ann, it's not real. And stop worrying about it, and stop trying to compare yourself to something that doesn't exist.
Yeah, exactly. And why do you want this strange little teeny bopper over here telling you how you should dress, how you should do your hair, what kind of makeup you should use? Who are they? You know, you almost have to get a little bit militant about it, but you really have to kind of take charge of your own mind, if you will.
Exactly.
So segueing from that, and you know, moving on from the notion of gratitude, because it seems like gratitude is probably part of this. When you do get fatigued and you do get discouraged, because we all do, what practical, concrete things do you do to get yourself to a place where you're able to be grateful, where you're able to employ those tactics of drawing on previous strengths? Because I think, at least for me, and I don't know if this is universally the case, but for me, when I'm feeling really discouraged and I try and just go right to refocusing on gratitude, I get resentful, or it just doesn't work. So what steps do you take to get yourself in the right headspace where you can focus on developing your own resilience?
Yeah, I can't answer for Evelyn, but I can riff on one of her earlier answers. I think part of it is just that disconnecting. It's like, okay, Jean Ann, this dog is not going to hunt. You know, I'm done. I just need to put it aside. I need to go to bed. I mean, there's times to make that decision. Now, the other thing that helps me is I've inherited probably an unhealthy amount of stubbornness. I'll persist. But it's like, I think it was Patricia Pritchett that when she talks about negotiation, she says negotiation is not just one conversation. So let's say you're trying to do something, people are telling you no, that's just one conversation. I can come back tomorrow. But sometimes it's just literally disconnecting, getting some rest. You're going to be in a much better mindset. And then if it's really, really bad and you just need to disconnect, you know, and just kind of escape for a minute, for me, I can just go in and read and get into somebody else's life and somebody's head. It just helps me completely forget about the situation and my own issues. But disconnection is the most important thing.
Yeah, I called it my time out. It's time to take a time out. And there are some times when you're working on something and you know you're done.
Yep.
It doesn't matter. You can spend the next 2 hours. It's not getting any better. And you need to know when to shut down, when to take that time out. The other thing that I really do is I have to stand back and look at what is a realistic expectation right now. What is a realistic expectation of myself, and what is a realistic expectation of others? So when I start to feel discouraged, it's like, okay, what's a realistic expectation? What can I do right now? And if it's nothing, it's nothing. And, you know, basically, what's a realistic expectation for me right now? What would be a realistic expectation of this other person that I may be expecting something from? So just making sure that the timeout is key. Timeout, stopping, for like Jeanine said, it may be a short timeout, it may be a longer timeout, it may be time to quit for the day. And then make sure that you are setting what would be realistic and reasonable expectations for yourself and for others. Taking care of yourself, sleep, exercise, connecting with others, taking those mental breaks. All of those things to me are key to building and maintaining resilience.
Oh, and your comment about reasonable expectations, we're often our own worst critic. You know, we think we're going to do X, Y, Z by such and such. It was like, this wasn't realistic, Jeanine. You just planned to do 8 hours of work on top of 16 hours of meetings. What was I thinking? And then I'll be really hard on myself. So it's literally, you know, don't set yourself up for failure and then beat yourself up when you can't do something.
So speaking of that, I mean, our whole podcast or radio show is built on like leadership and practice. And so a lot of managers are going to be listening to this. So what advice would you give them in terms of enabling resilience for their teams?
Got to role model it. And you don't want to be part of the problem. You know, there's a lot of research that's done on burnout, particularly not just physicians, but I think particularly in physicians. And I heard a statistic where 2/3 of burnout, there's a third of it they claim, and I'm not quite sure of all the research, that's certainly caused by the individual, the issues that they're dealing with individually, but 2/3 of it's caused by the organizations, the systems we live in, the boss, et cetera, et cetera. So you don't want to be that boss that's unreasonable. And you also want to role model it. It's okay to stop. I mean, I talked about the boss that is into kind of the FaceTime, and that's not helpful. That creates burnout, and that doesn't help people with resilience. You know, while they're sitting there and you think they're working, if they're smart, they're, you know, updating their CV. So, I mean, I think literally as a boss, we have to believe in it. And I have to give a positive shout out to Dr. Will Ferniani, who, you know, is one of my bosses. He is very intentional about not sending a lot of email to people on weekends unless it's truly an emergency. Well, when you get one on the weekend from him, you sit up and take notice, but he does not take it lightly. He goes, I do not like to bother you all on weekends. And he lives that. So to me, that's a good role model.
Yeah, I've heard that. Will has shared that with me, that he is very careful about what he expects from employees and from his colleagues on the weekends, because we all need that time to be away, and that's how we recharge, and that's how we jump up on Monday mornings and say, I'm ready to go, because you've had that time away. But if it continues throughout, if you have a Saturday afternoon and you open your emails, why you did that, I don't know, but you did, and you open your emails and you see that email that is going to stress you out for the rest of the weekend. So we really, you're right. We just have to role model what we're trying to preach and what we're trying to teach, and what we're trying to expect, what we plan to expect from everyone. We need to role model it, and we need to make sure that we're not, like you said, Jeanine, the problem, that we're not the problem, that we're not causing undue stress, that we're not interfering too much into an individual's personal time, and that we have realistic expectations of what they can accomplish and when they can accomplish it. We need to make sure that we set people up for success in their roles.
And I don't know necessarily that I've done it since I was at UAB, but it was like the last financial downturn when it was back in 08 and 09, going through some difficult times with my team and didn't have the answers to all the questions, but I had some worriers like me, so I understood them and I knew where they were coming from. But I finally got to the point where, you know, within reason, if you've got something that's keeping you up at night, please call me, please talk to me. I don't want you staying up at night worrying about something. If I can answer the question and help, I will. And most of the time I could, but it just really worried me that, and they were stressful times for everybody, but you know, I don't want you, I don't want you worrying needlessly about something that is simple, because a lot of times it was very simple stuff, you know, in terms of what was going on. So.
I had a team and it wasn't at UAB, but this was when I was at Mayo. I had a team, we were going through a huge transition and people were stressed. I gave as many answers as I had because I'm a firm believer in, as a leader, there's this old saying that says, information is power. Sharing information is power, because then you get the input and the perspectives of all the people that help make the best decisions. Really? So we're going through a transition period. I have several supervisors, and finally I held a meeting, and I walked in with a big bag, and I sat the bag on the middle of the table, and I said, you have so many questions. I know you do. I've given you the answers that I have. All the other answers are in this bag. So everybody got one of those 8 balls that you shake. You ask a question and you shake, and I said, now you have as many answers as I do right now. I think they appreciated that so much, because I was letting them know, when I get the information, I'm giving it to you, but until then, shake your magic 8 ball, because it knows about as much about this situation, because it was changing daily. And you know, this magic 8 ball will give you as much information as I can give you right now. Yeah. So it's just really having some empathy for what they're going through at the same time that you're going through it. Mm-hmm.
That is so brilliant. As we're wrapping up here, you know, we're starting to run out of time. So as we're wrapping up here, if you could pass on one piece of advice to anybody who might be listening to this program, what would that piece of advice be?
I would say prioritize relationships and develop goals that fulfill you as an individual. Yeah, that's it. That's it for now. Yeah, I've said a lot, so that's it for now. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I would layer on top of that the gratitude that we answered before, but I think really knowing your mission, vision, and values and goals, and kind of knowing what you're about, whether you share them with anyone else, I think that is absolutely critical. It helps you in making decisions. It helps you get through those tough times, because you're always you. And you can build on the you, and you can build on the values, and a lot of times those times are times of transition where you have to make difficult decisions, and if you're not clear on that, it can be really easy to veer off in the wrong direction. So I would agree with Evelyn.
Mm-hmm.
Any last thoughts? Any last
This has been really great. I got to tell you guys, I hope that that I offered a tidbit that will be helpful for somebody. A lot of times, if somebody just picks up on just one little thing that they can apply and use, and that helps them, then I appreciate that, and then I'm glad that I'm grateful for this opportunity.